Hey guys, welcome back to Vinceville Custom. So today I'm sharing with you a sort of a simple work in progress video. Sort of give you guys an idea that if you do get a statue and the base is way too high or you want a simple base, you can go about doing something like this. It's not a complete work in progress. It's kind of something that just kind of was dropped off at my door. Some work I do for somebody and just wants a really smaller bases. So I had some bases set up in the garage. I've been fine-tuning them. A little bit dusty right now, but we'll kind of go over what I'm doing. So this is the Tweeterhead Wonder Woman in 1/4 scale. Now that I see this in person, I really like it a lot. It's nice. I wanted to order this when it first came out, but at the time I was going through so much family issues and I didn't have the funds, so I skipped it. But now that I get to see it in person, that's something that maybe down the line, if I ever find a broken one or something that's cheap, maybe I would snag it up. And definitely when I first saw it too, I was like, I would get this item, but I would make a generic base for it because the base that they came with, it was just way too high. Because you have a big base, and then you have her body, and then you have her arm in the air holding up a spear. It doesn't really fit in a lot of Maju cases, Besta cases, DTOFs, or whatever. And, you know, whenever companies make these huge, elaborate, high statues, sometimes I think they forget sometimes collectors just don't have the room. So I think I would rather have wanted her arm down more or something, but this is what they did and it's fine. So what I would have done, and this is what I thought about doing when I was ready to order, was pretty much make a smaller base. So this right here is just a resin base that I made up in the garage over the summer. Whenever I get like my gallon kits of resin and I cast up for people, or you know, the resin's been sitting in the studio for way too long because it only has a certain shelf life of a couple months whenever you buy it and you open it. Or if I'm going into the winter or the fall and I know I'm not doing any casting for a couple months, I'll burn up all the resin, I'll make generic bases, and I'll just stack them in the garage, and then whenever I need them, I could go and fine-tune them for a statue. So when the client stopped by, he said he wanted to make a generic base for this, and we went in the garage and I had one base laying around. So all you really need to do is you go over to like a Walmart or order this online. You can find pizza tins, any kinds of sizes. And if you ever needed to, like, you know, make a pizza tin about 1 inch thick, you could go into your tin, you know, and you could just use like a, you know, metal marker or whatever, and you could kind of like mark where you want your mark to be, and you could pour in your resin to that spot, make sure it's leveled, and then after it cools down, it pops right out of the pizza tin. It doesn't stick at all, and you can make a base. With this one right here, though, I remember when I made this one, I had a little bit of resin left in the container, but I had a bunch of like broken statues and broken stuff and broken resin pieces I use as filler. So you see this is like blue Bondo that I put over here. Basically all I really wanted to do was just kind of spackle it up till I sand it down, and we're pretty much ready to go. Now this isn't going to be just a black base. This is going to be probably maybe like a really dark granite crack type base to go with something else I've done for him. So if we look at her feet though, I realized too, I thought that for some odd reason there was only one peg, but there's actually two pegs. They have a small one back here and here. So that's good, because I thought in the beginning, before I even like really looked at it, that it was going to be just one round peg. And the problem with a round peg is if you put a statue into the base and you turn the figure a little bit, you know, you kind of turn the figure, you'll scrape everything. But they were smart and they put two pegs. So what I did is I have these rods, hollow brass rods. This one right here fits this pretty good. It's a little bit loose, which is good, but it's tight enough where it's not going to like wobble. Now I have this square brass rod here. This is the smallest thing I have that's hollow. It doesn't really fit this smaller peg as good, but there's enough in there that I can actually wiggle this around and stretch this rod out, which I'm going to go and do in the garage. It's got a little paint on here. I'll clean that up. The reason why I'm going to use brass rods is I always have a fear of putting metal into resin. So if you Dremel a hole in here and you put like eaves in there and you put the the statue in there, and you kind of make your key before you working on it or painting it up. The problem is if you ever pop that statue out and put it back in, pop the statue out, put it back in, this metal will start chipping up your resin and or your eaves. But if you put a hollow brass rod in there as just your basic key area like this, you don't ever really have to worry about chipping this up, and it's always going to keep it nice and secure, and it kind of slides out. Now if it goes on your statue and it's really tight but it still goes on, and you have a little bit of grease, like there's white grease out there, you could sort of just kind of just put a little tiny white grease on, not like slather it all over. And then if you put that on there, it would make sure it goes on smoother and you won't have to worry about it. But like this one over here, it's going to be a little bit tricky. But if I can make sure that this is a little bit, you know, like what I'm doing is, it's kind of hard to see. We'll kind of zoom in a bit. Hold on 1 second. Kind of get there. So if you kind of like wiggle this and kind of without bending the rod though, you don't want to. Usually these rods don't bend, but or if you have something in the garage that could kind of work, you know, you could kind of just wiggle this and sort of stretch it out and make it like a circle. I do have better pegs in the garage, which I'm going to go and do. Like sometimes if you have some metal tools, I don't really have any in here. I got stuff in the garage I can use. And I'll make it so just enough that like when you put these two pegs into the statue, into this base, it won't scrape up the stuff. And we'll kind of line all that up in a second. So I'm going to go in the garage. And I'm going to go and stretch this out. This part is a little crimped here, but this I'll stretch out. And then this way, the easiest way to do this is having two rods and glue, and I'll kind of go over that in a second. So let me go in the garage, let me get this stretched out and everything, and then we'll start making our mark. Alright, so change of plans. What I needed to do is I needed to go a step bigger and kind of crimp it, and it goes on. Now it's a little bit loose, but I think once I lock it into place, this is going to be the one that holds up the statue mostly, and this is going to be the one to stop it from like turning. So I have this rod here. And let's make sure we have, it doesn't really matter which side we put it on. This is kind of, so this is the one we really want to focus on the most because this is the one that's going to hold her in. This one right here is just going to be like, just to make sure, you know, it does go. Now you can see it's wobbling, but once we get it locked into place, and as long as she comes in and out and it's sturdy, it'll work. So this one right here, you figure that right there is where the end of the key is, right? So then what we do is we grab our base and we say, okay, so if we dremel down there, we have about this much more room to crimp it at the bottom. So that's kind of where we're at. It's kind of close, but this is the largest, thickest base I had. I didn't have any more, and we didn't really have a chance to, you know, order any, but this will work fine. So what I'm going to do, there's two ways of doing this. One, what we could do is we do this. We can grab our little piping cutter tool for these things. You could crimp it in the garage and just cut it. If I had more room, like say I could cut it like this much more, then I would just use my cutting tool and just kind of crimp it, which I could still do now. So instead of doing it the clean way, we'll show you the dirty way, just in case you don't have the tool. So what I like to do is I like to put the piece on here just to be on the safe side, and then you can kind of crimp it from like right here, right? Sort of like right there, okay? Boom. Now, I usually do this in the garage, but I'll do it right here. What I like to try to do is sort of crush it while pushing it. I'm going to push it forward. I'm not going to pull it away because I don't want it to come backwards. I'm going to push it forward and I'm going to sort of crush it. Okay? So this way, we have that key all the way there. And you're going to see why it's good to crimp it. So now I got that black mark there. What I can do is I can go ahead and I can sort of cut it from right here. A little bit further up. Okay. So we have that key set up like this. And what we'll do is we'll kind of crush it a little bit more to be on the safe side. Make sure it's kind of crushed as best as possible. Sometimes if you crush it too much, it might kind of lock in place, but if you can pop it out, that's still good. Okay. So that works out pretty well. Now, make sure I'm not slicing my fingers doing this stuff. And the same thing with this one here. This will mark our piece over here. So this is as far as down as it goes. And then this piece we grab here, so we have a lot more room on this one. So what we'll do is we'll kind of crush it over here. So what I'll do is I'll put this one on here like so, right? We'll cut this over here, Make sure we don't lose the piece that we need. Put this back on, and then we kind of crush this one here. Alright, and then we kind of crush it again, and then we can cut this part off one more time. Alright, good. So we got those two pieces done. So before we go into the garage, the next step is I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to make my marks on the base. Try to get the camera off. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to kind of grind down these corners a bit. These little tiny corners. It'll make sense a little bit later. When we wash my hands, we'll come back and we'll make our marks on the base. Okay, so washed up my hands. Got my marker over there because I don't want to do anything wrong. So the next step is we put her on the base, sort of where we're thinking of getting the feet and lining her up. So you figure we're going to line her up like so. So the way this looks is I'm going to have to Dremel the hole first of the larger one, and then I can line up the smaller one. So I'm just kind of seeing, do we want to make sure? I guess that's as good as any spot because the heel's going to hit it. So just kind of make our little circle here. Alright, so we got our first circle done. So I'm going to go in the garage. I'm going to Dremel out a little bit of a hole there. Nothing too crazy. It doesn't need to be a huge hole, but it doesn't need to be perfect for the rod. It just needs to be enough that there's enough play where if the key is sort of at an angle, the rod kind of helps go in that angle. Plus also don't forget we crimped it wherever I put the pieces. They're over here. We crimped it. So if you try to make a perfect circle, you still won't get that crimped area. So you have to Dremel enough where that crimp kind of goes in there. But I'm going to go and chop this up. You'll see what it looks like a little bit. And we'll have this hole. We'll come back. We'll put her in. We'll mark up the other hole and go from there. Okay, so I got both holes situated. When we pop in this one here, just to show you, when you pop it in there, it falls in there pretty well. And it works out pretty well. Now, before we go any further, just to double check, is to make sure that her feet are flush on the base. Because if we're going through all this work and her feet are not flush on the base and we have to start customizing, it runs into issues. But I think her feet are flush. So let's just put both feet on. And yes, they are flush and it does work out. Alright, so that was a little bit of a concern. But there is a little bit of a falling backwards on the base. It's not because of the key. It's because her feet are not perfectly flush. And it's not because the key is hitting anything. Also, just to double check. Yeah, it's definitely not the keys hitting anything. It's just that her feet are not perfectly flush. But he says he's okay with that. And it should work out pretty fine. So, we just have to look on the side when we do this. Alright, so we're not worried about the back key. We're worried about the front key. So we take our metal rod and we put this on the front key first. And let's double check before we do any gluing or anything to make sure that this key goes in correctly and there is no issues. So it looks like there is sort of an issue. It could be because it's going in at a weird angle, or it could be because the way the piece is lined up. Alright, so there's an issue with this hole in this piece. Because this piece is a little bit wider around this, I have to keep this crimped. And you're going to, because what happens is when I put glue in here, if I don't keep this crimped and I pour the glue in there, the glue will seep into the key and lock the key in there and everything, and you can't get the statue out. So this must be crimped. So what I need to do is I need to get down in there and I need to make this hole a little bit bigger. But that's okay. That's what A's and everything is for. So let me go and make this hole bigger and then we can do this correctly. Okay, so went back in the garage and I fixed the bottom of the hole. Not the top of the hole, the bottom. And you might be asking, how did I do that? Well, I have this Dremel tool here. So what I did is I put this into the hole, went down, and then I went around like this. So The hole stayed the same, but at the bottom of the hole, it's bigger. So it's going to capture this little crimp part easier. So this way, I have a little bit more room. And I went ahead and I tested it, and I put her on here like so. Make sure she's lined up, and it works out pretty good, and that's going to line her up pretty good where we need to put her. So we are good in that sense. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to go on to the next step. I'm going to try to get the camera to come down a little bit closer, show you what's going on, and we'll kind of work that out. But before we do, what we need is you need your Instaset, and you need your BSI gel glue. And the reason why I always say I use this BSI gel is it's because it's gel and it doesn't bleed all over the place. And it makes life a lot easier with gluing statues, repairing statues, and building them. I suggest getting this gel, ice gel glue. I've done it, talked about it many times, so trust me. And then Instaset, which is basically it helps, it makes the glue pop in a second. So if you are to like glue two pieces together and you got a family member or something, they could take a little drop of that Instaset and hit it for you, and boom, it's done. Or if you're able to put something here and then drop the Instaset, it's good to go, and it cures it in a second. So let me get the camera downwards a little bit more, and we'll show you what's going on. All right, so the goal is to glue this in and to make sure the rod stays in and the statue comes out, but the rod stays exactly where we want it. So just to double check, kind of making sure we're lining up a little bit correctly where she's going to go. So the back of this heel might be raised a little bit, but if we push this heel downwards, then this part looks a little bit weird. So we're going to have to just deal with it. That's just the way it is. It's not the end of the world. It should work out pretty fine. Alright, so you got to be careful too, because if you have one that kind of slips, this is kind of tight, so it's kind of good that it's going to lock into place, you know? So that's good. But if you have one that slides in and it's falling in and out, you got to be a little bit careful. But I'm going to go ahead and open up our Instaset, but make sure our Instaset is nowhere where it's going to fall. I have these little squeeze sponger things, and just get a little bit of Instaset in here. You don't have to get a lot, just a little bit. Put it to the side. Keep it away from your glue though. Make sure you don't have the residue on your fingers yet. Make sure that the residue is not anywhere or gets on this, because it'll set up. Even the fumes will set it up. Now, what I like to do is make sure we have a nice fresh thing, is squeeze the glue down at the bottom. Now, you don't want to squeeze the glue all the way up to the top, so when you put her in there, it squeezes all the way over and it locks her foot into place. But you don't want to put just a tiny bit in there where it just kind of grabs. You want to put enough that you think you're comfortable enough that when you put that brass rod in there, it's going to hit the glue and it'll stay. And if there's a little bit of a gap around that rod, that's okay. We're going to fill that in with ease. It's okay. So I'm going to put my magnifying glasses on to make sure that when I squeeze this in, I don't over squeeze, but I don't under squeeze. It's better to do it under than over. So basically what I want to do is put the piece all the way down in there like so, and I'm just squeezing a bunch of glue in there. But when you pop it out, just be careful. Alright, so I think I need a little bit more. Okay. Alright, squeeze a little bit more. Yes, that should be good. That should be good enough. Alright, so take your gel glue, put your cap back on, and get it away from this Instaset. Now, we're going to have to move a little faster. What I like to do is I like to put the Instaset on the rod. Okay? Just get the Instaset on the rod. Instead of sitting there trying to squeeze it in there, just put it on there. You got some fumes on, you're good to go. Let's get the light out of the way. Let's get her lined up. And then, boom. Make sure she's kind of lined up good. Make sure everything's okay. And hopefully, we can go ahead and we can put some Instaset at the bottom. And just let it sit up for a second or two. Give it a little time. It'll probably cure up. We should be pretty good. If you did it good enough where you didn't put too much glue, but you didn't put enough glue, it should lock into place fine. And let's just kind of hope it kind of cures. So if everything worked out well, right now it's kind of popping it out, and then the rod stayed. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, we're going to grab a towel, I'm going to squeeze a little bit more of this Instaset down at the bottom. So our rod stayed a little bit forward. It's not the problem. It's not the end of the world. That's kind of how where it kind of stayed. You kind of see. So we're gonna double check. I'm gonna make sure I have any residue of that Instaset is probably on this hand. So I'm not gonna try to grab it. I'm just gonna put my palm on the side, and then we're gonna kind of just make sure that it goes in. Yeah, and it's a little bit too heavy yet to let her kind of go backwards, but we're doing good. That's good. That's a good start. All right, so we pop this off. So let's grab her other rod here, and let's just do a double check to make sure that this rod will go in with this one. Yes, it will. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. See, it sticks up a little bit, so we're going to have to... Alright, so I'm going to have to go in the garage and Dremel that out. It's a little too... not perfect. One key is easy. Two keys are always a pain in the ass. And it's also probably because it's a little bit warped. Alright, let's see if we can do the key in this direction. Yes, I think that will work. Alright, so we are going to go for gold. We're going to try. We're going to see if this works. Okay? So number 2. Now, if you're good, if you're risky or you don't want to go too crazy, if you didn't squeeze a lot of Instaset all over the place and there's not really a lot of fumes, you can kind of get away with this. But these do come with extra caps, one extra cap. So we're going to just go ahead and try. Squeeze this down. Okay, that's good enough. Get this out. Same thing as last time. We have a little bit of extra Instaset in here. We're going to get this rod like so. And we're going to go in this. This one's a little bit looser, but like I said, it's just a placeholder. And it's like so. Come on. I'm kind of doing this at a different angle. Right, this direction. And that should hopefully hold. Okay, that is definitely where we want to be. Alright, so what I'm going to do though is I am not going to go any further with this for the night. It's already, you know, we're kind of getting close to that 8 o'clock mark. We're kind of getting tapped out. So you can see how these two whole pieces are sort of sitting there, so they're kind of close. The problem is if I put her in there and I do it and I kind of push her, it'll probably crack this glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this cure up for the night. And tomorrow when I come back and I work on some extra Ave stuff, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill in the rest of this hole there, over there, very carefully with Aves and go with it. Now if you want to, you could fill this in with more glue if you want. It's up to you. If you don't have Aves, you could go ahead and fill that in with glue. You just got to be careful not to get the glue inside that piece. But I feel a little bit more comfortable doing it with Aves. So that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, so I'm going to let this cure up. I'm going to go ahead and put my Instaset back in the bottle. Close up this bottle because I have a habit of knocking it over. Put Wonder Woman away. And we'll come back and we'll fill that up tomorrow. And then after that's done, if she lines up correctly and it cures and she's pretty much set, ready to go, we go ahead and paint the base, and that is it. It's a pretty much simple base, straightforward. So it's going to be more of a darker, granite, cracked, dirty look to it because he has white display cases. So if we do white marble, she might look like she's floating in there. And then we're not going to do straight, pure black. because I think straight pure black might make it pop too much. So I think like a nice darker gray, granite, like the other Linda Carter Wonder Woman I painted up, something like that, because that's what I did for him. So he wants this one as well. So we'll come back tomorrow, we'll get this filled in, and then after that we can go ahead and start painting. Okay, it's the next day, and I was ready to put the eaves in, but I wanted to double check, and sadly, I think what happened is something shifted, and she's sort of top heavy. And she's going backwards. What it is these heels and these feet are not actually lined up perfectly. So you see how she wobbles on me? I have to redo this rod and this rod here. I'm going to not really worry about the back piece. I'm going to worry about the front piece only. Something is just not lining up correctly. So I'm going to Dremel this out. I didn't realize she was top heavy going backwards. I did put a little glue in there just to see if everything was going to go okay, and sadly it didn't. So I'm going to just Dremel this back out, and I'm going to Dremel this back out, and we're going to start from scratch on this. Something I think what happened, and this kind of happens once in a while, is this piece sort of like wobbled, and then when it cured, it didn't cure correctly. So it's really simple just to Dremel this out and make another rod. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to try again step 2 and see how it works. The other thing too is what I'm thinking is maybe this top piece is not perfectly flat, or her feet aren't perfectly flat. But I'll get it. So I'm just going to Dremel these back out and we'll start again. Okay, round 2. What I did is I made sure that this piece goes in a lot further. So this should work out. And I got to try to center the rod too. I think that was also the problem, because it wasn't centered. It gave me a little bit of an issue. So let's... going for round 2. Let's get this stuff set up. I've had this happen to me in the past. That's why it takes a while to get used to this. Like, sometimes they'll work perfectly, and other times they just don't. It's just the nature of trying to line these things up. So this time, I'm going to throw a little bit more glue in here. A lot in there this time. I think that should be pretty good. I think also trying to line up the back piece was also an issue. Should have kind of just like ignored that until this kind of lined up. So this time we're going to make sure we get into the center a little bit more, like that. Make sure that our feet are sort of lined up a little bit better. And then we're going to, I think, just like right about there. I think that should do it. And then we just hold it again. Sadly, what's going on is this back heel is just raised a little bit, but if we flatten this back heel, the front foot comes up. And then if we put this perfectly flat, this piece comes up way too much. And I'm not going to resculpt the heels or anything, because we're not going to go that route. We just want to have her on the second base, and we're just going to kind of hold it like this for a little bit. Just want to make sure the main feet are sort of kind of there, like kind of down. Let's see how this kind of pops up a little bit. Hoping that we didn't glue anything. Okay, that looks pretty good. Throw a bunch more of this in here. So what happens is when you try to put this in again, if you kind of wiggle it too much, you break the glue and you reset it. So I got to try to kind of get in there correctly. Alright, that looks good. Alright, so I'm going to hold this right now and just kind of hold it for 5 minutes while I watch a video and let this really cure up. And then once it cures up and this instance that sort of kind of evaporates, we'll come back. Alright, so I popped her out, and this is kind of in there pretty well, but I really want to lock this into place. I really want to make sure this kind of stays where it's at. So I do have some extra A's somewhere over here. I put it where it's over here. But I want to make sure that this doesn't really go anywhere else, and I want to double check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some more glue over on here. I'm going to throw some more glue over there. I'll throw some more eaves in there in a second. But what I really want to do is kind of make sure this sort of sets up. Alright, I'm going to let this set up again for a couple more minutes. What I like to try to do is turn it upside down too and get a lot of that Insta-set out of there. Only because sometimes if you just let it pool in there, it'll evaporate over time, but if you try to start messing with it and stuff, it'll cause more issues. But we have enough room to throw at least some eaves around there. And once that glue really kind of cures, it'll lock it into place. But I just want to double check. So let's let that cure up for a bit and we'll come back. Alright, so everything looks pretty good. So I got some of this extra A's while I'm working on some other stuff. What I want to do is just kind of lock this in place. I did double check one more time to make sure she wasn't leaning, and she looks pretty good. But just to be on the safe side, I want to get this A's in here. So there's a little bit of an air pocket on the front of this. And I just want to try to get this A's all jammed in here as best as I can. I normally would love to just do A's and make sure it's really, really locked into place. But sadly, unless the statue can really stand on its own, and I don't really have to worry about glue setting it and stuff, it's better to do it this way. Some statues that literally just kind of like are perfectly balanced and I don't have to worry about any of that. I can go ahead and just put like eaves on there and let the statue sit overnight and it'll just lock into place and I don't have to worry about it. But with this one we have to go the glue route to make sure she doesn't wobble backwards. If you can set it up though, like you could use like masking tape or the blue tape and you can set a statue on the base and you could put eaves in there or whatever else stuff you like to use and you can set up tape and kind of rig it. I've done that in the past with some statues, but with this one, since I don't really want to mess with the pre-paint factory and have to repair anything and it's not being something customized at the moment, I try not to mess with it. So more or less just kind of sit here and get all this in here, and then once this really is locked into place and it really supports her, we'll work on the key of the back heel, which is going to be sort of a pain in the ass, but we'll get it done. Now the idea too is make sure you're not getting eaves stuck inside the tube or any glue stuck in the tube, because then that's just going to cause more problems. But we're just kind of making sure that this is going to really lock into place as best as we can. Where did I put the gears? Right there. Alright. Now, one of the reasons why I try to make the tube a little bit longer sometimes, this one sadly we didn't have that problem, but so, say the key only went this far into the base, right? Say the key only went that far. What I like to try to do is I like to try to make the tube longer and crimp it down here and have like a big gap of air. Just in case if I ever use baby powder or if I got a chunk of eaves or something went into the bottom, it doesn't lock it in here and then I can't get the key. And if you have a little bit of extra like space, it makes, if you kind of understand what I'm trying to say. Everything's always different. You gotta go case by case. But with this, just kind of making sure everything's looking pretty good. Now it's built up a little bit higher in the back, but I think that should work pretty good. If I have to, I could do some sanding. But that's the hole right there for now. So, gonna go put this on the shelf. I'm not gonna mess with it for the rest of the day. I want to make sure all this is locked into place, and then we'll come back and we'll work on that key. Okay, it is the next day, and I went ahead and cut myself a new rod for the back of the heel. So I got this all pretty much set up. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put some eaves in this piece. Just make sure I get this rod set up correctly. I had to use a square one to kind of crimp it again. So instead of putting glue in this time, I am going to just shove a bunch of eaves in here And I'm going to put the rod in, and I'm just going to put her aside. I got some other stuff I'm working on, and I really don't want to mess with the glue too much. Plus, I want to make sure that I get a lot of eaves in the front of this. So we're going to just kind of take out some eaves there. And just see. Get all this out. We don't need to have that much eaves in there because we'll kind of seam it up later. This eaves is sort of getting tough anyway because I've been working on something. So, alright, I'm going to go wash my hands. I got a little bit of stuff on there, and then we're just going to put her in. Alright, so we got the rod here. I put it at this angle so it's a little bit loose, plus it doesn't like crimp too much. So the goal is this time, the same thing again. Just kind of sit here and make sure we get this in the right angle. It's a little bit. There we go. It's a little bit hard to see. We'll kind of zoom in a bit. So, like I said, sadly this this rod is sort of sticking out a little. I'm pushing the piece down. It's the only way it's going to work, like I said. So this is going to stick up a little bit off the base, and you're going to see a little bit of that rod there, but it's not the end of the world. I'd rather have this little tiny rod show a little bit if you were to look at the side than to have this foot hanging up in the air not touching the base. That was the problem. So now that that's pretty much set, this eave should probably harden up good within another 3 hours. I'm not going to go crazy trying to make it perfectly flat right now. Just enough to sort of log in. Let's kind of just push this in a little bit more just in case. Make sure it's not squeezing up a little bit. Yeah, and we're just going to leave this alone. So I'm going to put her aside, let this cure up for the night, and then I could come back tomorrow and sort of flatten that out. And then once that's flattened out, pretty much just start painting it. Of course, I do have to touch up the hair because a little piece did break off. I guess it was sort of cracked and it kind of just fell off. So I got to take care of that. But yeah, it's this worked out a little bit better this time. Like I said, it's a little bit tight, but I think it's going to work better the way I did it because the first one, like I said, was wobbling and she was leaning back. But right now, she doesn't lean at all. At least the front foots are touching. Okay, so I went ahead, filled this in, cleaned it up a bit. It's still not 100% perfect. There's still a lot of mess ups here and there. I'm not really too worried about that because this is going to be cracked and broken up and it's going to be kind of messy. So I still need to fill up this little hole here. Just to give you guys an idea too, I sprayed it with a Universal Black DS100 or T100. I love this Universal Black coming out of the can. If you could get your base perfectly smooth with no scratches and smooth out and no issues, and you could spray that on even, you get a really nice looking base. But because this is going to be all like kind of cracked up and rocked, and like we're doing sort of like a darker granite paint up on this, don't really have to go too crazy. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in this hole. There's a couple other little holes here and stuff. I'm gonna kind of just sand this little roughness down. There's a couple little spots here that kind of, but like I said, it's not the big deal. We're going to play the base up with some imperfections on it. So I have my putty here, and go ahead and grab the sponger tool. So we'll kind of let that sort of kind of dry up. We'll make sure this is filled in pretty well. And then after that, we can go ahead and start painting this up. But it's hard to probably see, but if you kind of hit it in different lighting, you can sort of see scratches and imperfections. Like I said, it's a really, really messy base, but that's okay. That's what we're going to utilize that for. So don't overthink your bases if you're going to kind of do granites or sponge tools or make them look messy. But if you want that perfectly black, smooth silk base, then you got to go through a lot of extra steps of fine-tuning it. Alright, so I filled up this hole. I did some sanding. I hit a little bit of black paint on it. But like I said, we got some dust on here and we got some messiness and stuff. So that's going to play into effect. So it's a Wicked Color White. And we have some old paint. Now, This is a bottle of paint that anytime I have extra paint, whether it's blue, black, green, metallics, pearls, whatever, I usually throw in this bottle. But I do have another bottle that's kind of more red and more blue, but most of the other colors I kind of throw in here. And this is kind of going to be good for, you have a black base, then we have white, we have that grayish, and then I got a sponge, and we're going to do sponge work. So I'm just going to kind of create a texture, and then go from there. Real quick, if you notice these, I forgot to tell you last time, these are just a little silly putty that's over those 2 notches for where the pegs go. So the idea is we're going to kind of create like a granite textured stuff. Now, you could step away from it and you can do like airbrushing if you want, but I like to do the sponge work. And then we're going to kind of go in with washes with the airbrush. So it's kind of little steps here and there. And then after that, we'll use a paintbrush and add in cracks and just kind of keep playing with it. So right now it's just some sponge work, so I could kick on some music and kind of just get to town on this. Alright, so I'm in the airbrush now, and well, the airbrush booth, and I have some white, and this is my old Badger 360. So this brush is really good for kind of creating a speckle effect. Trying to use up the last of this white. It's kind of sort of thickened up on me. So what I do is I usually kick on the airbrush booth, and I spray this far away, and I kind of create a dust. Kind of create a dust around the items, and any little extra speckles, it's not going to hurt it, so it lightens it up pretty well, but it's a little bit too light. So we go to a black paint, or we can go back to our base color. Alright, so that's pretty gray now. It's a little too gray. I need to actually buy something of black paint for the airbrush, because I keep misplacing mine. So I have some Vallejo black. Try not to use too much of the Vallejo for something like this. Now what I'm doing is I'm cleaning this out, because I'm not really going to use it too much more. Alright, so that gives us sort of a texture. Pretty simple. So what I like to do next is get a airbrush, like a fine thinner one. And this is more of using... Let me get this situated. Okay, so we have some transparency black tint from Badger Freak Flex. So what I like to do is kind of throw some random shades. Just kind of throw it around. And then we also have Freak Flex brown tint. So all about layering this up. So the brown tint's really good because we can sort of get a little different color in areas, so it's not just pure black and white. I'm not really even thinking about where it's going, I'm just kind of like staining it. Alright, so I need to clean out the airbrush because that Freak Flex stuff is kind of old. So what I like to do now is kick on this again and use Testor's dull coat. Sort of kind of melt these colors together. What it is that dust sort of gets on there and it sort of creates like a really nasty type of a dusting, and it looks like it's actually dusted. But the spray lacquer Testor's dull coat sort of kind of melts it a bit. Kind of helps seal it a little bit. It's good against the acrylics. Now I'm not saying it's always going to melt the stuff, but it's sort of got a little bit of thing. So I like where it's at right now. It's not overly, you're not thinking about it too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sort of dry naturally with the airbrush booth on, because that Testor's dull coat's very, very, it stinks all hell. So it really gets pretty nasty. So I'm going to clean out my airbrush. I'm going to let this dry up a bit. Then we're going to go and we're going to start working on cracks, and then we can work on more messing it up, and we'll kind of go over all that. But right now we got a nice good base for it. It's not too light and it's not too dark, which should work out pretty well for Wonder Woman. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I got some water here, and we got some white and some of the gray. So what I like to do is kind of get a really nice... We also have some of the black here. Get a really nice little water down part, and then what we're gonna do is start working out like cracks. So like, once again, I kind of don't really think about it too much. Just kind of run with the crack area. Just kind of, I'm gonna have to use a darker color first. See, the problem with the paint coming out of the tube, it's a little too thick, so we'll just kind of go here. So I gotta find my crack first, kind of just run with it. Got a little water over here, and then what we'll do is, where's this crack? And kind of just go with a crack and just kind of go around. A little bit closer. So this is an old brush and it's kind of a little bit messy, and that's a good thing because it's going to help me, like, doesn't have to be perfect. And then what you do is wherever you find your crack, when you go in with a little bit of white, or you want to go, it depends on how well you want to do it. And then what I usually do is kind of follow that crack with a little bit of white. To kind of give it that little lighter part. Like so. And you start kind of creating cracks on your area. Like so. And then what I like to do, sometimes you take some of your whites and whatever, and might go in with some of my browns, and kind of just do some washes around it too, and just kind of just make it messy. Just kind of let things kind of mess up and get kind of messed up and funky, and just play with it. I'm not really overthinking it too much. Just kind of just running with it, and you just start kind of creating stuff. And if you put too much white, go back over with the black. And that's kind of what I'm going to keep doing. So I'm just going to keep going, doing those kind of cracks around here, and just kind of keep playing with it, and just keep building it up, and just having fun. And then afterwards, go back in with some more washes, maybe some dry brushing, and just kind of keep playing with it, and just have fun. Alright, so I want to add a little more to this. I was looking at the older base I did, so it's a little bit more whiter stuff. So what we're going to do is see if I can pull this off a little bit. So this is kind of watered down white paint. So I'm just kind of want to get a little bit more whiter areas kind of in some stuff and just kind of play with it a little bit more. Hopefully some of this will dry up. I have to go back in with some more of the cracking, but okay, and then we do have some of this transparency brown. It's just a matter of just kind of like, you know, just throwing layers, letting the water and brush just kind of create little textures and make it messy, and just going around in different areas. Trying to let the bottom layers stick out with the top layers going on top. And then go to some of the black. Yeah, so I'm just going to go around and keep doing some more of that. Just kind of keep dabbing and stuff and just kind of build up some more textures. And then we'll go back in and deepen up the cracks a little bit. So I mix some of that transparency brown with some of the transparency black. And what I'm going to do is just kind of darken up some areas. Kind of letting it go a little heavy in some areas and. Alright, and I think clean this out and do some more dabbing and just kind of keep building. Alright, so I did this a little bit off camera just because what I wanted to do is I wanted to spray this down before I close up shop for the night and leave the, as you can hear behind me, the airbrush booth going, so this way you could get out the fumes. So what I did is I sprayed this down with Duplicolor clear top coat about 2 days ago. It's pretty much cured up pretty well. There's a little bit of stuff you could feel with your hand on it. I don't want it to be super glossy. I kind of want it to be more of a satiny look, but I wanted to give it a nice good clear coat. So what I like to do is I do that, and then once that's done and it's kind of good for like 2 days or so, I just get my sandpaper here, and I'm going to kind of wash it down, sand it down a little bit. And if any little like white spots pop up, if I like get any little pieces that are kind of sticking, I'll kind of touch it up with a paintbrush. It's kind of hard to see in camera, but it's like it's still not perfect. Because of the way the piece is, and I don't really want it to be super shiny. So what I usually do is I kind of just go over the item like this, scratch it up a bit. I'm not trying to like sand it all down and go crazy, just kind of getting any kind of little pieces taken off of it. But I did do a good coat on it, you know, just kind of a good coat there. I just want to make sure that, like, kind of when you look at it at a certain angle, it's not like, you know, little pieces are sticking up, bad pieces. Like I said, I don't care that it's not perfectly flat, but I just don't want it to be completely little things sticking up. That's kind of from like the dry brushing and the sponge work. So then what I kind of do is I just go over here. I'm not pressing hard. I'm just going like very lightly. Just pretty lightly on it, not really going too crazy. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could, you know, you could go ahead and do whatever you want. So what I like to do is if I was going to do like a really glossy marble look and I had it like completely perfect, then I would do like a couple coats and sanding and a couple coats and sanding and kind of really get it down. This is just kind of helping me get like any of this little weird things sticking up. And then once that's done, it's pretty straightforward. Grab a towel kind of just get the dust off a bit. A little bit, get that dust off of there. And like I said, if you see any little spots pop up or white spots, you can go in there with a fine paintbrush, get it cleaned up. And there. So like usually like something like this type of brand, it wouldn't be completely perfectly shiny unless that's what you're going for. So what I like to do next is, like I said, I got the airbrush booth going. It's kind of noisy. I hit it with a Duplicolor Adhesion Clear top coat. And then after that, I'm going to use some of my Vallejo Mecca satin or flat varnish. Probably mix up both of them. I want to give it a nice varnish coat. I don't want this to be super, you know, shiny. I don't want it to be flat either. But I definitely don't want it to be like as glossy as it is now. It's a little just too glossy. And it's too glossy and it's going to pull in a lot of those imperfections. So I'm probably just going to go with the flat varnish on it. So once my other item dries up, I'll kind of hit this up and everything. But I'll probably go in the garage right now and I'll probably spray this down with this adhesion promoter. And then just to make sure too, what I use is a lot of my old silly putty. I always go back over to these little spots here with these rod holes and I put silly putty on there because I don't want any of my clear coats or any of my layering or whatever getting into there because that's going to cause problems with the peg. So always make sure that you kind of make sure those are kind of cleaned up. So I'm just going over this with my hand. I'm like, if I see anything I think that's sticking up a little bit, kind of just go over there and take it down a bit. If you want, you can use some alcohol while you wipe this down to get it cleaned up, but I like a little bit of that dust kind of in there, kind of just adds some more imperfections and making it look dirty. Alright, so I'm going to go and get this adhesion promoter on. It'll dry pretty fast, and then I'm going to go over to the airbrush booth and just give it like a nice flat coat. And then if there's anything in there I need to touch up, I can, but I like the way it's looking. Alright, so the final steps of the base, we pretty much got it all set up. It's all done. Flatten it down. Basically hitting it with that top coat really helped a lot. So here's the bottom of the base. So usually what I like to do for people and all my bases, the client can pretty much change it on their own, but I usually like to put these little pads down for them. I used to get that Eva pad, and I used to cut the circles and everything around, but I haven't had a chance to go out to a Hobby Lobby in a while, so I can't really do that. And then what I usually do is I throw one of my stickers at the bottom of it as well. Sign it and then get it all out. So that's kind of what I like to usually do with these. Kind of just throw a sticker down and then sign it. Because I usually get asked to sign the stuff. So, and I always put the date. And that's pretty much it for the base. So I use these from Home Depot. Only because this is all I can usually find, and then usually it's also easier for them to take it off if they want to do something else on the base. The guy that I do work for, sometimes what he likes to do is get those foam pads, and has my friend in Canada, Metajohn, do etching and stuff. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it because Metajohn doesn't have an etching until he gets to the new machine, but at least now when he gets it, he puts on the base. So I did put some black paint around these, but what happens is they kind of stick out. But this is the problem with the statue. It's not perfectly flat feet. So we'll pick her up off the floor on my soft towel because I get very paranoid. So we put her into the base, kind of just wiggle her in a bit, get her at the right angle. Hold on. And then make sure she goes into the other peg with her heel. And then there you go. She fits into the base, no problem. So, works out pretty well. I really do like this statue. It does look good, and I do like the idea that it's a simple base. You don't have to make a round base. If you like the base that she came with, but if you really want to go crazy, you can chop off like the bottom or the top of that base that came with the statue, and you could kind of tweak it and bring it down more. But also just making simple round bases works out pretty well because I personally like museum poses. I like statues that have sort of a pose, but they're on just a simple base. I'm not really crazy about big, huge, elaborate bases and all that stuff. It's kind of not my thing. But with this one, it worked out pretty well. like I said, sadly, her feet are not perfectly flat, so you see a little bit of them sticking up over back there, but I hit it as much as I could, so it works out pretty well. And I do like the statue a lot. If I ever get a chance and I find one of these on eBay cheap, or somebody has a broken one and I can snag a broken one or something, I wouldn't mind having this in my collection. Of course, I would really repaint it and tweak it up a bit, though. Because I like the anatomy, I like her ab section, and I like the anatomy. I'm just not a fan in how they oversprayed a little bit of dark there, but I would also fix the booty a bit and just give it a little bit more of a, booty crack, I guess you could say. But other than that, it's a really great statue. It's not bad. I do like the stars, too. I like how they're bigger stars on here and are not, like, super small or stuff. It's a really nice statue. It just needs a little bit more of a sprucing up, I guess you could say, if I ever was to get one for my own collection. But all in all, that's simple, generic base for this Wonder Woman from Tweeterhead. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with some more videos.